A death row inmate's final wish isn't always a hearty meal or a confession. Sometimes it's simply to see a dog. The small note was placed on Caleb Moore's desk like a message from beyond. Scrawled in shaky handwriting, it read, "I want to see Rex one last time. Elliot Granger, inmate number 0271, death row." Caleb stared at the line as if facing a coded message. Who was Rex? A relative? A memento? Or a dog? The answer lay deep in the thick case file of Elliot Granger, a 72-year-old black man, the quietest inmate on Iron Creek Penitentiary's death row. They called him the Quiet One, not because he had nothing to say, but because he knew that even if he spoke, no one would believe him. Convicted of killing 3 white teenagers in a deserted park on the outskirts of Wyoming, Elliot neither resisted arrest, nor hired a lawyer, nor pleaded innocence. He accepted the death sentence like someone greeting a storm long familiar, silent, enduring, and accepting. Caleb, a rookie correctional officer, inexperienced but driven by instinct, sensed something was off. Why would a man charged with such a brutal crime not fight back? Why be so calm? In the dusty old archives, Caleb found a photograph. The man in the picture, clearly a younger Elliot Granger, sat on the porch of a wooden house. Beside him, a large white dog rested its head on his knee. Elliot in the photo wasn't smiling broadly or posing. There was just a quiet gentleness, as if he had once loved and been loved. That was what Caleb couldn't shake. Could a cold-blooded killer have that kind of bond with a dog? When he brought the note to Warden Mace, the prison chief laughed mockingly. An old black guy who killed 3 white kids now wants to hug a dog before he dies? That's funny. But when Caleb explained that this was the only request Elliot had made in 5 years, no special meal, no phone calls, no visits, just one thing, to see Rex again. The smile slowly faded from Mace's face. Rex wasn't listed anywhere in the system. No pet was ever registered under Elliot's name. But at an animal rescue center over 30 miles away, Caleb found an old white dog that had been dropped off 3 years prior by an elderly black man. No name, no message. Its name, too, was Rex. And now Rex was on the list for euthanasia. In exactly 3 days, the same day Elliot Granger was scheduled to be executed. Caleb stood silent for minutes in front of Rex's cage. The dog didn't bark or whine. He just looked up, eyes deep, sad, and knowing. Tomorrow, Caleb would bring Rex to the prison, even if it got him fired, even if he was mocked, even if he was laughed at, because something in Caleb's heart told him that 72-year-old black man should not die in silence. And Rex, that old dog, was not just a dog. The meeting to come would not simply be a goodbye. It would be the beginning of a truth buried for 5 years. That man had been silent for 5 years, but in his eyes there was a sound sharper than any words. The truth. Iron Creek Penitentiary, a place where even light felt cold. Caleb walked through the mold-stained corridors, gripping the leash tightly. Rex walked slowly beside him, unhurried, as if he knew exactly where he was going. When the death row doors opened, every eye turned toward the old dog. Some sneered, some spat, some fell into silence, as if remembering someone long gone. But only one man stood, Elliot Granger. His eyes met Rex's as if a long-broken bond had been restored. Caleb heard nothing. No words, no cries, just 2 survivors finding each other again in a place built for death. Rex approached. The 72-year-old man dropped to his knees, struggling as if burdened by 100 pounds of guilt. But when Rex's head touched his palm, Elliot broke down in tears. Not the cry of a man awaiting death, but of someone who could finally exhale. Caleb stood still. Something about that moment gave him chills. A kind of sincerity that couldn't be faked. A fragment of truth he had never seen in the eyes of any death row inmate. Caleb muttered softly to himself, "He doesn't look like a killer." Quietly, he stepped out of the visiting room, leaving Elliot and Rex alone. But just as he turned away, he froze. A faint, weak voice came from behind. "I didn't kill them." Caleb spun around. Elliot still sat there, not looking at him. His hand gently stroked Rex's head. His eyes stared off, as if the words weren't for Caleb. but for himself, after years of silence. They killed Max, and I stayed quiet to protect Rex. Caleb didn't fully understand, but he knew this was no ordinary execution. This was a secret that had been imprisoned with Elliot Granger for 5 years, just like him. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He reopened Elliot's entire case file, the death sentence for 3 lives. Jason Keller, Eric Dawson, Luke Thompson, 3 white young men, all with drug-related records, all found dead in Highland Park, strangled by bare hands. The injuries were deeply personal. No witnesses, no cameras, but there was a confession from Elliot Granger himself. No lawyer, no defense, just a typed confession, signed. The trial lasted less than a day. The media dubbed him the Highland Strangler, an old man seeking vengeance for racial injustice, and people believed it. But now, because of one dog, the truth had begun to crack. Caleb found himself caught between 2 worlds. One side was the legal system that had condemned Elliot. The other was the gaze of that old black man and the quiet in Rex's eyes. The next morning, Caleb returned to Elliot. "Who killed Max?" he asked directly. Elliot stared at Caleb for a long time, then replied, "The 3 who were killed." One had a lightning-shaped scar under his chin. "He stabbed Max 3 times. "Did you report it to the police?" Elliot nodded faintly. "They came, took my statement, then said, 'It's just a dog, Mr. Granger.'" Caleb felt the blood in his veins go cold. "And after that?" Elliot looked him in the eye. 2 days later, those 3 were dead. A week after, 3 men came to my house. One wore a uniform, one wore a dragon-shaped gold ring, one called out Rex's name. Caleb could barely breathe. Elliot said one last thing before the visit ended. "I confessed to keep Rex alive. When justice falls asleep, the ones wearing dragon rings decide who lives and who dies. The old records room buried deep in the basement of Iron Creek Prison is where untold stories still linger, in dusty boxes, faded photos, and forgotten reports." Caleb sat on the floor, surrounded by the Granger case file. It was no longer just a death penalty case. It had become a maze of suspiciously mismatched details and inconsistencies. In one overlooked police memo, Caleb found a chilling detail. No ligature was found at the scene, yet the wounds didn't match the grip strength of an elderly man. Another line read, "A curved scratch was found on the inner thigh of victim 2, possibly from an animal claw." A dog, a scratch. For the first time, Caleb asked himself, did Elliot really commit the crime? Or was he taking the fall for someone else? Or something else? That afternoon, Caleb went to the Iron Creek County Animal Shelter. He asked about Rex and Max, the 2 dogs Elliot once owned. An elderly staff member named Hannah Ross led him into the archives. "Rex came in 3 years ago," she said. An older man wearing a worn-out military jacket brought him in and said, "Keep him safe. If anyone asks, say he's a stray." Caleb furrowed his brow. Did he give a name? Number. But he wore a strange ring. Dragon head. I never forgot it. Caleb's heart pounded. The ring. Dragon-shaped. The 3rd man in Elliot's story. Hannah continued. "We named him Rex because he responded strongly to that name. But here's what's strange." She pulled out a pet microchip scanner. Rex has a chip, but not the usual kind. It broadcasts at a low frequency, like the type used by the military. Caleb's eyes narrowed. A dog with a military-grade chip. Trained? Like a K9? Then he remembered. The old photo clipped in Elliot's file had a small note. Elliot Granger, retired sergeant, Gulf War veteran. That night, Caleb met Elliot again. "You served in the military, didn't you?" Elliot nodded slowly. "And Max? Rex? They were trained like service dogs?" Elliot didn't reply. He just looked Caleb in the eye. "The man with the dragon ring, who is he?" Finally, Elliot spoke. "Franklin Carter, lieutenant, my former commander, a man I once saved, the only one I trusted after the war." "He's the one who took Rex to safety?" Caleb asked. Elliot nodded. "I called him when those 3 kids died. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew If I didn't confess, Rex wouldn't survive. Why is Rex so important to them? Caleb didn't understand. Elliot looked toward the window, where the moonlight crept in. Because Rex saw everything. That night, when Caleb returned home, he found an envelope at his apartment door. Inside was a short note. Dogs can't keep secrets. Neither can people. Stop digging. Along with it was a photo. Rex locked in a cage, his eyes no longer calm, and a hand behind him, wearing a dragon-shaped gold ring. Humans can lie, but a dog's eyes, they don't. The sky was gray that morning, with a light drizzle falling on the old courthouse roof in Iron Creek County. In a small office behind the public library, attorney Naomi Green was rereading Elliot Granger's case file with a look of deep suspicion. Naomi, 34, Jamaican-American, Harvard-educated, had left a prestigious law firm to return home and open a pro bono legal office for veterans and wrongfully accused minorities, people like Elliot Granger. She tapped her fingers on Elliot's old statement. No lawyer, no rebuttal, immediate confession. Too tidy, too fast, too perfectly wrong. The door burst open. Caleb walked in, rein still clinging to his coat, holding a folder. Naomi, you need to see this. He tossed the folder from the animal shelter onto her desk. Elliot's dog, Rex, is still there. He has a military-grade microchip, and he was dropped off by a man wearing a dragon ring. Naomi's eyes widened. Not a dragon ring like, yes, the third man in Elliot's story. Naomi stood up abruptly. If the dog was trained, he might remember. Caleb nodded. I contacted a retired FBI K-9 behavior expert. She said if Rex witnessed the attack, and if Elliot's telling the truth, the dog could react strongly to seeing the perpetrator, or something tied to them. The two went to the shelter. Rex was in his kennel, quietly tracking Caleb's movements. But when Naomi entered, wearing khaki clothes similar to a security uniform, Rex suddenly growled. She stopped. Caleb tried to soothe him. Easy, Rex. She's a friend. But Rex didn't back down. His eyes were sharp with wariness. Naomi's heart sank. She understood. He's not reacting to me. He's reacting to the uniform. Naomi pulled something from her bag, a county police cap from Iron Creek, an old piece of evidence from the case file. She carefully placed it on a stool in front of Rex. The dog stood, let out a snarl, then lunged. He tore at the hat, growling, clawing, shredding it. The room fell silent. Naomi turned to Caleb. We have a bigger problem now. Hours later, in Naomi's office, her computer screen displayed the personnel records of officers active in Iron Creek when Elliot was arrested. Caleb pointed to one name. Robert H. Wilson, lead investigator. Now deputy warden at Iron Creek Prison. Naomi stared. So, the man who arrested Elliot has been guarding him for 5 years? Caleb nodded. And if Elliot's right, Robert is the one with the dragon ring. Naomi gritted her teeth. We need to re-examine the case footage. Everything. And most importantly, she turned to Caleb. We need to bring Rex to Elliot. The next day, Naomi personally filed a motion with the court, citing the need to evaluate witness-animal response as part of supplemental investigation. The judge, a fellow veteran who had served with Elliot, approved it. For the first time in 3 years, Elliot was brought out of solitary. He entered the meeting room and saw Rex standing in the corner. His eyes welled up. The dog didn't bark, didn't leap. He simply walked over, gently, and rested his head on the old man's knee, just like before. No words were needed. That moment froze the room in silence. Naomi looked at Caleb and whispered, We just witnessed a testimony. Not with words, but with the heart. Killing a dog is a crime, but killing the truth is an atrocity. When Rex placed his head on Elliot's knee, Naomi knew she had just uncovered a secret far bigger than any charge in the file. This wasn't just the story of a wronged old soldier. It was a system desperately trying to bury a filthy truth. That very night, she and Caleb returned to her office and tore through every detail of the case. While Naomi re-examined statements and autopsy reports, Caleb focused on traffic camera footage near the park where the murders happened. Suddenly, he froze a frame. Naomi, look at this. The angle was blurry, but clear enough to show a black pickup truck bearing the Iron Creek County insignia parked about 100 meters from the crime scene, just minutes before any emergency call was made. Naomi frowned. A police vehicle at the scene before the 911 call? Why? Caleb typed in a few commands. Patrol vehicle records popped up. That plate number belongs to one person, Robert H. Wilson. The room grew icy cold. The next morning, Naomi brought the file to the Iron Creek District Attorney, Dennis Haywood, a red-faced, silver-haired man known for his hardline stance and close ties to the police. Sitting across from him were Naomi and Caleb, armed with a full report. We have reason to believe Elliot Granger was coerced into confessing, and Officer Robert Wilson is directly connected to the killing of Max, the destruction of evidence, and may have been involved with the 3 murder victims. Haywood stared at them for a long moment, then leaned back and clapped his hands twice. The office door opened. Robert Wilson walked in, wearing a prison uniform, with the dragon ring on his hand, smiling. Well, Naomi. Long time no see." Caleb jumped to his feet, fists clenched. Naomi stayed calm. "I'm not backing down, no matter how many dragon rings you wear." Robert slowly walked over and placed his hand on Naomi's desk. "You're going too far." Elliot Granger confessed. "You're trying to dig up what's already buried. And if you keep going," he leaned closer, whispering near her ear, "dogs don't always get to live, especially the ones that bite the wrong man." As they walked out of the DA's office, Naomi felt a chill run down her spine. "They're warning us." Caleb nodded. "And if I'm right, they're not going to stop at threats." That night, Naomi's legal office was broken into. Nothing valuable was taken, except for one thing: the hard drive containing Elliot's recorded statement and the footage of Rex's reaction. On the wall, sprayed in red paint, were the words, "The old dog is dead, stop digging him up." Naomi understood. This wasn't just about Elliot anymore. This was a dirty network involving police, prosecutors, and men who once swore to protect justice. But who would rather kill a dog, burn the truth, and destroy an innocent man to protect their power? She turned to Caleb. "They made a mistake." "What?" he asked. "They think Rex is just a dog, but to Elliot and to justice, Rex is a living witness. And this time, that witness will be heard. When humans go silent out of fear, sometimes a dog speaks in their place." That morning, Iron Creek was no longer a quiet town. In the center square in front of City Hall, a press tent had been erected, and attorney Naomi Ellis announced a press conference with a shocking claim. "We will present new evidence, and our first witness is a dog." The announcement sent shockwaves. Media outlets swarmed the area like bees to honey. District Attorney Haywood dismissed it as a publicity stunt, but public opinion sided with Naomi. No one could forget the image of Rex sitting calmly beside Elliot during their reunion, with eyes that seemed to hold a story left untold. The press stage was modest: a wooden podium, a few microphones, a large screen behind them, but the focus was Rex, sitting quietly next to Naomi, his dark eyes gazing into the crowd. Naomi began with questions that held the entire audience in suspense. If your dog were stabbed in front of you, what would you do? If no one believed you, if no one defended it, what would you say? And if telling the truth meant the other dog, the only friend you had left, would be killed too, would you still speak? A heavy silence fell. Then Naomi played the recovered video, a cloud backup Caleb had luckily saved before the break-in. The footage showed Elliot collapsing beside Max's bloody body. 3 men stood around him, laughing, then walking away. One turned back and kicked the dead dog. Rex, then a small pup, howled and barked furiously, the hidden camera installed. Earlier by Franklin, Elliot's old comrade, had captured it all. After the video, Naomi led Rex to the stage and gently gave a signal. Rex approached a set of photographs laid on the ground, images of the 3 murder victims. Naomi mixed them with random, innocent photos. "Rex, look, who hurt Max?" Without hesitation, Rex growled, then barked loudly at one photo. Jason Mercer, the first victim, then at Eric Thompson, then Luke Dawson, the very 3 Elliot was accused of killing. But to Rex, they were the real killers. The crowd was stunned. A journalist whispered, Can't just be coincidence? Another reporter stood up. Attorney Ellis, can this be considered evidence? Naomi nodded. No, it's not traditional evidence. But this is testimony from the only living being who was at the crime scene. And today, Rex has identified the true culprits, not Elliot. Minutes later, a video interview with Franklin Carter played. He confirmed installing the hidden camera and revealed that Elliot had begged him for help before being arrested. But before Franklin could hand over the evidence, he was pursued and had to fake his death to survive. Rex, meanwhile, had stayed under his care until Franklin could no longer keep him. Naomi concluded, Elliot Granger didn't kill anyone. The only thing he hid was this, that Rex's life was worth more to him than his own. And today, Rex has spoken for him. The media erupted. Hashtags like #Justice for Elliot and #Rex Speaks trended nationwide. People who had lost faith in the justice system began to rise up. Iron Creek residents gathered in protest, demanding the case be reopened. National news outlets called it the first dog testimony that changed U.S. legal history. At the DA's office, Dennis Haywood slammed his desk and shouted, "Charge Naomi Ellis with legal obstruction." But what he didn't expect was this. A young prosecutor, once a former student of Elliot, resigned and petitioned for a retrial of the case. When the law becomes a weapon for the wicked, justice needs those willing to break the rules to do what's right. Night wind rustled through the pine trees surrounding Iron Creek Prison. The air was heavy, as if it knew what was coming. Franklin started the engine of the old truck. Inside were Naomi, Caleb, and Rex. The aging shepherd, still swift, eyes sharp as if fully aware of his role tonight. Guide, guard, and if necessary, warrior. The plan was dangerously simple. Naomi and Caleb disguised themselves as emergency medical personnel with forged transfer documents crafted by a former intelligence agent. Franklin would infiltrate from the rear through an old tunnel from when Iron Creek was a military compound. Rex, fitted with a mini camera and trained to detect signs of life from prisoners, would lead them to Elliot's solitary confinement. There's no turning back. Either we get him out tonight, or they'll make sure he dies naturally in his sleep, Franklin said as the truck stopped 200 meters from the main gate. In cell 17B, solitary unit, Elliot Granger lay on his cot, the dim yellow light casting shadows over his weathered face. His body ached. Since the evening meal, he'd felt nausea and headaches. He knew this wasn't just age. They chose tonight, he thought. But if it's death, please let me see Rex one last time. 9:41 p.m., prison main gate. Naomi and Caleb presented their papers. Reason: emergency cardiac transfer to state medical facility. The guard, a bored, heavy-set man, checked the documents lazily. Everything went fine until he glanced at the prisoner list in the system. No transfer orders from solitary tonight. Naomi kept her cool, voice like ice. We're acting on a federal emergency directive. You want to make a call to Washington while a heart patient dies because of your spreadsheet? A moment of hesitation. Caleb held his breath. From the truck, Rex let out a low growl. The guard shrugged. Your call. Don't say I didn't warn you. The gate opened. They were in. At the rear of the prison, the old service tunnel. Franklin crawled through the narrow shaft, weapon ready. He knew this route, once used for transporting ammunition during Iron Creek's days as a military post. He froze at the sight of fresh boot prints. Someone was patrolling the tunnel, Franklin whispered into the earpiece. They've got men down here. Change of plan. I'll create a distraction near the water system. Once I light the candle, you have 7 minutes. 10:07. Naomi and Caleb reached the solitary block. By then, Elliot was barely conscious, but a familiar sound stirred his eyelids. Breathing, soft where warm. Then a cold nose touched his hand, a soft growl, tender and familiar. Rex, he whispered, is it really you, boy? Rex nuzzled into his palm and tugged gently, as if to say, get up, master. There's still a way out. Naomi quickly injected an antidote provided by the FBI. The disguised doctor whispered, this is a hopeful shot, but if you can't walk, we can't save you. Elliot nodded weakly. Naomi unshackled him and helped him stand. Alarms blared. Franklin had been spotted. Red lights flooded the cell block. "Our 7 minutes are up," Caleb said. "No," Naomi replied, eyes burning. "We're just getting started." The chase began in the dark. Rex led the way. Naomi supported Elliot. Caleb unlocked each electronic door. Behind them, the thudding of boots and blaring radios echoed. Escape route breached. Tech unit guard knocked out. Suspects include 1 inmate, 2 impersonators, and a dog? At the maintenance yard, Franklin waited. The SUV was running. He hit the gas as soon as he saw Naomi, with Elliot leaning on her and Rex at their side. A bullet sliced through the air. Rex turned, growled, and lunged at the shooter, an officer wearing a gold ring. The man fell. Rex dashed past like a ghost. They leapt into the SUV. Franklin shouted, "Hold on!" Tires screeched on the wet road. Patrol cars followed. But Caleb had prepared. He activated a signal jammer. The prison's internal tracking system went haywire. After 2 kilometers, they turned onto a forest shortcut and vanished. At a secured FBI safe house, Elliot was hooked to IV fluids. Rex refused to leave his side. Franklin whispered to Naomi, "Tonight we rewrote Iron Creek's history." "No," Naomi replied. "We've only started the final chapter. Justice does not come from the courtroom. It begins with the first voice brave enough to speak the truth." Dawn broke over Iron Creek, but this time the light did not chase away the darkness. It exposed it. The entire state of Georgia woke up to a shocking headline. A 72-year-old Black Death Row inmate escapes Iron Creek prison, FBI involvement suspected. His name, Elliot Granger. The media exploded. Every news outlet repeated one strange phrase. His last wish was to see his dog. Television stations fought to broadcast the video, leaked by an anonymous source, showing Elliot holding Rex, with the caption, "Dogs don't lie, and they remember what the world forgets." The clip went viral. Millions shared it, with questions flooding every corner of the internet. If he's a killer, why risk everything just to hug a dog one last time? A black man sat in prison for 5 years, never begged for mercy, just asked to see his dog. At the secure FBI safe house, Elliot slowly regained consciousness. His eyes turned to the TV screen, where footage of protests in front of Iron Creek prison played. "Justice for Elliot," and "Don't kill the innocent. Listen to the dog." Naomi placed a hand on his shoulder. "They're starting to hear you, Elliot." Franklin, seated nearby, let out a sigh. "But it's not enough. We need a bigger bang, something to push the system into a corner." The political game had begun. The FBI officially launched a special investigation under the codename Project Mercy. The first statement from Special Agent Jacob Mahoney stunned the public. "We have evidence suggesting Elliot Granger may have been coerced into confessing in exchange for the life of a dog." Reporters dove in, and they discovered this. The 3 victims Elliot supposedly killed were all tied to a drug trafficking ring operating inside the state prison system. One of the original investigating officers, Robert Keene, died suddenly after telling relatives someone is being set up. Iron Creek's warden, Thomas Laird, abruptly retired with no explanation. Within 72 hours, the story had turned. A poll conducted by the New York Post showed 78% of people believed Elliot Granger was innocent, 62% demanded a full reinvestigation, and 41% believed his request to see Rex was a final cry for help, no. Unheard. At the state capitol, governor's office, an emergency meeting was called. The governor sat across from Sarah Morgan, Elliot's legal representative, and Franklin. Sarah dropped a stack of documents on the table. "These are the records of 12 death row cases under review for errors in the last decade. And this," she pushed forward a copy of the video brought by Rex, "is proof that at least one was deliberate." The governor sighed. "If what you're saying is true, the whole system could collapse." Franklin raised his eyes. "Then it deserves to collapse if no one does anything about it." 1 week later, on CBS, live interview. Elliot Granger sat across from the host. Rex lay beside him, eyes glowing like sunlight. "You were silent for 5 years. Why speak now?" the interviewer asked. Elliot hesitated, then said, "Because I thought I was going to die." And before I did, I just wanted one thing: to see Rex again. But when he looked at me, I realized if I die, the truth dies with me. And that dog, he deserves to live. The nation rose. #NumberJustice. For Elliot trended across the country. Hundreds of thousands signed petitions to the president demanding a federal investigation into Georgia's criminal justice system. One quote from the interview appeared on the cover of Time: "I don't want to die to prove I'm innocent. I want to live. Justice is not a gift granted. It is a battle, and sometimes the victor is the one who has nothing left but an old dog by his side." The federal courthouse was packed. Journalists, human rights activists, veterans, and citizens filled the room, holding signs that read, "I am Elliot," and "A dog is more honest than the courts." Sarah Morgan, Elliot's attorney, stood in the center of the weighty stairs. In front of her sat 3 federal judges. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice steady as forged steel, "this is not just a trial. This is a question of principle. Does a 72-year-old black man, a veteran, poor, with no voice, and only a dog for a friend, deserve to be heard in a society that calls itself just?" The final piece of evidence was presented. Franklin stood, his hand trembling as he held out a USB drive, the last recording from the hidden camera he had installed before faking his death. The screen came alive, showing 3 men entering Elliot's home, threatening him, coercing him. "Confess, old man, or we'll deal with your dog first." No one in the room had doubts anymore. Many wept. The man who had sat silently throughout the hearing now stood. Elliot Granger, with white hair and eyes deep as a storm-torn ocean's, spoke little. "I was ready to die, not because I was afraid, but because I thought I had nothing left to live for. But that dog, he wouldn't let me give up. He waited for me. 5 years. He still remembered his way back. If a dog can remember like that, then I have a duty to live, to remember my own dignity." The court's conclusion came swiftly. The judge's gavel struck. The federal court declares Elliot Granger not guilty. All charges are dismissed. The state of Georgia is ordered to issue a public apology and provide restitution as required by law. The courtroom erupted in applause, tears, and the sound of renewed faith. 1 month later, Elliot moved into a small house outside Atlanta. A wide yard, green grass, and Rex napping peacefully under the morning sun, his dark coat tinged with silver. Franklin lived with him, and Sarah visited weekly. From 2 lost souls, they had become a family. Elliot founded the Granger and Rex Foundation, supporting wrongfully convicted veterans and funding PTSD therapy dog training for the elderly, ex-inmates, and abused children. A year later, at the unveiling of a new City Park monument depicting an old man beside his dog, Elliot spoke at the dedication. "I do not forgive what happened, but I have chosen to live, and to live is to not let the truth be forgotten." This dog is not a miracle. He is simply proof that sometimes loyal love is the only thing that keeps a person human in a cruel world. The camera panned to Rex. He raised his front paw and gently placed it in Elliot's hand. Just like the day Elliot sat behind bars, asking only to see him one last time. Justice isn't something handed down. It's a fight. And sometimes the one who wins it is the person who has nothing left except an old dog by his side. The federal courthouse was overflowing with people. Journalists, civil rights groups, veterans, and everyday citizens came holding signs like, "I am Elliot, and a dog is more honest than the courts." Sarah Morgan, Elliot's attorney, stood before the 3 federal judges, surrounded by heavy stares and held breath. "Your Honors," she began, her voice unshaken and sharp. "This is no longer just about a conviction. This is about principle. Does a 72-year-old black man, a veteran without money, without power, with only a dog for a companion, deserve to be heard in a country that claims to be just?" The final evidence was presented. Franklin rose from his seat, hands trembling, and handed over a USB containing footage from the hidden camera he had installed before he faked his death. On the screen, 3 men entered Elliot's home, threatening and intimidating him. "You confess, old man, or we'll take care of the dog first." No one in the courtroom doubted any longer. Tears ran down more than a few faces. Elliot Granger, silent throughout most of the hearing, now stood up. His white hair shone under the courtroom lights, his eyes deep with storms weathered. "I was ready to die," he said quietly, "not because I was afraid, but because I thought I had nothing left to live for. But that dog, he didn't let me give up. He waited for me, 5 years, and he still remembered how to come home. If a dog can remember like that, then I have to live, to remember my own dignity." The judges needed little time. The gavel fell. "The federal court hereby declares Elliot Granger is not guilty. All charges are nullified. The state of Georgia is ordered to issue a formal public apology and pay restitution in accordance with federal law." The courtroom erupted. Applause, weeping, and a wave of hope rippled through everyone present. 1 month later, Elliot settled into a small house outside Atlanta. A wide yard with soft grass and Rex napping in the sun, his once black fur now silvered with age. Franklin lived with them, and Sarah visited every week. What had once been two broken people had become a family. Elliot established the Granger and Rex Foundation to support wrongfully convicted veterans and to fund PTSD therapy dog training for the elderly, former inmates, and children who had survived abuse. 1 year later, a new statue was unveiled in the city park, a sculpture of an old man sitting beside his dog. At the ceremony, Elliot addressed the crowd. "I don't forgive what happened, but I've chosen to live, and to live is to refuse to let truth be forgotten." This dog isn't a miracle. He's just proof that sometimes loyal love is the only thing that keeps a man human in a cold world. The cameras turned to Rex. He lifted his paw and gently placed it in Elliot's hand, just as he had done on the day a man behind prison bars asked for nothing but to see his dog one last time. The story ends here, with a 72-year-old black man who once gave up so completely that he chose silence over breath, and with a dog who never stopped believing that his master deserved to be heard. A man can be accused, forgotten, betrayed, but a dog will always remember who loved him and will fight for that love to the very end.